Welcome to the Casual Temple. Today, our fabulous guest is M.A. Weidman, aka the Given Ghost. M.A. is not just a musician, but is a storyteller of the ethereal realm with soundscapes that take us on a journey beyond the ordinary. We'll talk about M.A.'s beginning as a seeker and as an esoteric enthusiast, and we'll explore the creative process of one of my favorite subjects, Mars and Aries energy, and how that helps or hinders the creative process. M.A., I'm so excited to have you on the Casual Temple.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me, Marilee.
Yes, thank you. And I just wanted to, talk a little bit about where we sort of met in the virtual realm
Yes.
is on your friend and mine, Foolish Fish's Discord,
Yep.
aka Denny Poisson.
Yep. Shout out to Denny.
Shout out to Denny.
Yeah, for real. He's been, God, he's a treasure. He
He
really is.
is.
Yeah.
I can feel him blushing, even though he can't see or hear
Oh, I
us.
know. I know. I'm sure he is. But that's part of what makes it so special, right?
I
I mean,
know.
he remains humble, yet he's so knowledgeable and so enthusiastic about all this stuff.
Oh
And
my
he's
gosh.
built a broad community around him. And
Mm-hmm.
we wouldn't have met up without that, of course. And
No.
the Discord's growing. Yeah, he's a fabulous guy.
Yes. Yes, I definitely met quite a few wonderful people in the Foolish Fish Discord that I think are
Hmm.
awesome. So it's a really good place, people. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, yeah, to anyone watching or listening, if you haven't checked it out, you should.
yeah.
Yeah, a lot of stuff to learn, a lot of stuff to pick up on. He has
Hmm.
a lot of really good videos, a lot of good insights, a lot of good book reviews as well.
Yes. Watch
Yeah,
your pocketbook. Yeah.
yeah. No, you'll be spending a lot of money, but
Yes. Oh my goch. Every time I like leave him a comment, I'm like, yeah, you just made me spend some more money. Thanks, Denny.
yeah,
Like, thanks a
yeah.
lot.
It's like, oh yeah, $60. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I get pump that out every week. Yeah, so it's so great. Yeah, and you like one of the reasons you always stuck out to me, you as like a person in the Discord that
Mhm.
got to know, is you always have these like really thoughtful things to say about a lot of different subjects, and I'm always like paying attention when he posts
Oh,
like, oh, he's always
that,
got like great things to
that
say.
that's so nice to know. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So, it's always nice to get a compliment, especially, when you are putting a lot of thought into what you say um and when you interact with people, I think is so helpful. So,
Well,
very
thank you.
cool.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of that, we live in a world where there's a lot of people that, say things without thinking,
Hmm.
and obviously there's a certain balance point, you can't be skeptical all the time, right? But
Yeah.
just taking a moment to, take it back and think about what you say, consider
Yeah.
what the person's saying, what their intent is, and how, what information they're hoping to get, what they're looking for. And from there, you can kind of have a little bit of a moment of empathy there where you're thinking, okay, well, this person really wants a certain thing.
Yeah.
They're coming out from a certain position. And so,
Hmm.
trying to be thoughtful about that is really important, I think.
Yeah.
Especially if it's, hardball subjects, where, sometimes people are looking for answers because they're going through a hard time. And,
Hmm.
you have to, at least in my view, it's always better to try to approach that from a place of curiosity than a place of trying to, you know, be a helping hand if you can.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's such a good way to approach, especially online communication.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Well, yeah, so much gets lost and,
Yeah.
especially in, text communication. I mean,
Hmm.
you can't really read someone's intentions clearly,
Yeah.
when there's a veil of, you know, certain, physical cues and stuff that you just can't pick up on. So you're just reading things at face value. You're like, oh, well, I guess I'll use emojis to like,
Right. Like,
uh,
hey.
yeah. It's like, oh, well, I mean, I guess I'll, just throw some of these in just to make sure that people don't think I'm, being a jerk or like,
Right.
but
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, I do think my day job is um, in the tech industry, but I answered a lot of emails and Teams messages, so I feel like I'm kind of a queen of emojis. Like,
Yeah.
man, I'm good at massaging with emojis.
Well, yeah, because I mean that's a whole different lexicon. We're just like, okay, so there's this text here. but I
Hmm.
need to work in this image real quick just to kind of soften what I'm saying a little bit,
Right.
maybe,
Yes. Yes.
but
Yeah, it's a definite balance, and you're doing really good is what I'm seeing.
well,
Um,
thank you.
yeah. Well, we kind of just start, especially since you're a first-time guest, kind of the beginning, wherever you consider your beginning as a musician or as an
Mhm.
esotericist, wherever you're led to start. Love to hear it.
Well, you know, so I was raised in kind of a evangelical, Protestant environment. I grew up in the Nazarene church.
Mm,
I was, born out in Little Rock, Arkansas, and then moved up to Kansas City when I was young. And um, that denomination is pretty conservative historically.
mm,
They usually have, or at least at one point in time, they had, bans on dancing and going to movies and doing all this other stuff, as well as, the occasional fire and brimstone kind of approach for uh, conveying one's place in the world, I guess, is one way of putting it. But,
mhm,
over time, when I was young, I had a lot of anxiety around that kind of stuff, you know. A lot of the fear of sin and the fear of, punishment and all that stuff kind of really it really kind of seeps into your pores when you're, a child. And that kind of led me toward, you know, I read the Bible a lot when I was a kid, and obviously the interpretations that I was surrounded by were very much literalist
mhm.
interpretations, ones that were more so informed by a more recent development, in interpretation, even especially in evangelical circles, which is
Yeah.
that of, if you don't believe in Jesus, you're going to the lake of fire. I don't make the rules, right?
Right. Nice.
So that's kind of so that was a kind of a point in which I was like, well, but the Bible also talks a lot about angels and demons and various other
Hmm.
entities that are littered throughout the book that, we're kind of glossing over a big portion of this here. And eventually, when I was young, I started having certain experiences where there was once actually that I remember very vividly. I was 11 years old and I'd just taken a shower and I went downstairs after taking a shower and was going toward our living room where my brother, my mom, and my dad were. They were watching a movie. And I look down the hall and I see this translucent version of my grandfather who had passed away when I was 8. And I just looked and saw this translucent entity that was very clearly my family,
Hmm.
and I saw him walking across the kitchen and toward and into a light fixture. It's like very bizarre stuff. And, I didn't have any explanation for it. I was just shocked. So I
Yeah.
ran into the room and, my parents, my brother were just sitting there looking at me. I'm like, did you see him? They're like, see who? What are you talking about? Like they're watching a movie. I'm like, well, our grandfather just walked through the kitchen and you didn't see him? They were like, no. Like, and they kind of looked at me like I was nuts, but I was
Oh
like,
boy.
like this happened.
Yeah.
And oddly enough, actually, my dad, he had been having dreams around that point in time where he was talking to his dad. And
Oh.
so there was a lot of like, there's interesting stuff there where it's like, okay, so maybe in some way there was this lingering of the presence of,
Hmm.
of him.
Yeah.
So there's that and a lot of other, kind of scarier stuff. But um, I think that might have been the starting point of where I was starting to look more into, what's behind the curtain, what's going on here because, this book that has been sold to me as a literal truth that encompasses everything,
Yeah.
cannot explain this because, there's only two places, right? There's up or down, right? But yet there are things here.
Right.
So so now, it was my task to try to figure that stuff out.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah, that's kind of definitely a scary thing, especially if like nobody else in your family is seeing it and you're except sounds like your dad was kind of having his own sort of different experience, but
Hmm. Yeah.
um yeah, that's like so scary, especially as a kid. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's hard. And, I mean, and I kind of had to be careful about who I was talking to and
Hmm.
what information I was giving because,
Right.
you know, the first thing that is on the tip of people's tongues sometimes in those communities is, possession
Right.
or, you are being influenced by malevolent entities that are making you
Hmm.
hallucinate. And it's like, well, I don't know
No.
about that. Maybe not, but
Yeah.
that, it could be that.
Yeah.
Or it
Yeah.
could
Yeah.
be a
Could be
whole
something else.
variety of other things potentially. So, it kind of started me out on looking and, doing a bunch of ghost hunting and, looking
Mm.
into stuff pertaining to, at that point in time, it was, Wicca was kind of the big thing.
Yeah.
And so kind of looking into stuff like that for a while. And, it's, I had other experiences where people, uh, friends of mine, we were, hanging out and, going into these abandoned places and, looking for ghosts and all this stuff. And we were young. And there were times where, that kind of stuff, well, eventually, if you go looking, eventually you find it. And there's just sometimes there are beings that are not wanting to be found, or they just want to
Mm.
be alone, and they're
Right.
trying to, get you out of their space a little bit. So, or at least it
Hmm.
seems that way, because if you're in a place that all of a sudden there's a bunch of you know, loud noises and, things shuffling around and very odd omens that are happening around you. Like there was once where we were in this abandoned dye factory, I think, and I think that's what it was. It was like right next to a train depot. And we were sitting in this back room, and all of a sudden, this hummingbird comes flying in at like 1 in the morning.
That doesn't happen. Yeah.
No, it doesn't. And
No.
it sat on this rafter because this place is in disrepair. All the ceilings are ripped out and,
Yeah.
everything is in disarray. But this hummingbird flew in about 10 feet from where we were and sat on a rafter completely still for what felt like hours, but in reality, it was probably just a couple minutes. But that was, seeing that, I was like, oh no, like this is like I don't know what this is, but this is bad. Like
Oh,
this is scary. But
yeah.
all of these things they kind of threw me into a rabbit hole of trying to look for answers and look for explanations. And for a while, there was a point where I identified as a pretty hard agnostic toward
Hmm.
a lot of stuff. And to be honest, I mean, still a little bit today. I mean, the agnostic tendency is still there because,
Yeah.
I try not to get too far into being too certain of anything.
Right.
Um, because otherwise, we might fall into stoking certain delusions that
Mm.
might actually end up hurting us down the road. So
Yeah.
trying to have as clear of a picture as you can,
Hmm.
having the door wide open for uncertainty and for the unknown, while at the same time trying not to be swept away by things that may be too good to be true. So I try to keep that balance as best I can. But then there are things that happen where it's like, shit, I have no
I
explanation
have
for that.
no idea.
Like,
Yes.
like literally, it's just these things lined up and they're just happening and I have no explanation for it, but it's nuts. And the
Yeah.
correlations are just too crazy and the chances and the odds are just way too astronomical to have a rational explanation for it. So constantly
Yeah.
living in that balance of skepticism, and then also like, oh my God, like there's something really, really big out there, you know.
Yes. Oh gosh. Yeah, for sure. Oh my gosh. I do want to say like I feel very akin to that sort of idea of the agnostic
Hmm.
for sure. I do feel that. But I think for me, I have to like I think there's just this analytical part of my brain. Like we talked about like our different our signs and
Hmm.
our different house placements. And so mine is like a Virgo moon,
Hmm.
uh, and so it's a very analytical thing.
Oh yeah.
So I for myself, I have to like have some sort of I call it my own personal cosmology, right?
Hmm.
Because I need to figure out how to move around, like I need to
Oh
figure out how to
yeah.
navigate.
Oh yeah. No,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And understanding that stuff it's incredibly powerful. It
Yeah.
helps you contextualize yourself in a way that other methods can't.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it helps you be able to operate in the world having more self-knowledge. And,
Hmm.
more self-knowledge is always better than less.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
knowing all that stuff and understanding all the placements and understanding all
Hmm.
the mythologies and the associations and correspondences, I mean, it's all very important for
Yeah.
self-knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I like the like your approach because it's very similar to mine. Like I like to leave the door open for being incorrect or being,
Mhm.
like having new information because
Yeah,
if I look back at my life, it's just a series of getting new information. It's like,
exactly. Exactly.
yeah.
And that's the thing is that, you know, our limitations as percipient beings,
Hmm.
we can only go off of what we can internalize from the outside world and
Right.
the things that stir around and, the inside of ourselves. And we make the best guess, but and we have to press on with that. And that's actually,
Yeah.
part and parcel for later. But
Yeah.
it's the limitations that we do have. Eventually, we have to take those along with us and do the best that we can with those limitations in order to make a situation better for ourselves and everyone else. Because we're
Hmm.
constantly operating on limited information.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
we just have to do our very best. And that's why if you have the spirit model, it's like, okay, like, hey, I evoked this spirit, but nothing happened. It's like, and it's probably, if it's out there, if it's a, corporeal being in another dimension, it's probably screaming at you like, why don't you get it? I'm telling you, but
Yeah,
we have
totally.
limitations, we can't know
I
everything.
don't know, man.
So we just have to go off of, the vague kind of signs that we get from the other side.
Oh, that's too funny. I love that image you gave me because I saw it sort of like in our current reality, like us screaming at an ant, right?
Oh my
Like, why
God.
don't you get it? And the ant is like, what? It can't even tell. Like, can't even hear us. I don't even
It's
know if
like,
they have ears.
this big thing is a tree. It looks like a tree. It's big like a tree.
Yeah.
Probably a tree. But then I'm sitting there like, move. Like,
Get off.
like, like get out of here.
Yeah.
Why are you on my counter?
Yeah.
Like,
Exactly. Oh, that's too funny. Yeah. I do love thinking of those things. The macro micro thing, like what is actually going on? It's pretty
yeah,
crazy.
the big hermetic scale of being.
Yes. Like, God. Um, oh, not to get off too much of a tangent, but did you see Denny's talk with Lon?
I did.
It was good.
Oh my God, yes, it was so good. It
Lon
was
mileage cat
fantastic.
people.
No, yeah, and
Yeah.
listeners, watchers, audience,
Yes.
please do check that out.
Yeah.
Another example of a very
Yes.
well-informed, knowledgeable, wise man who is
Hmm.
also just humble as all get out. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, there's so little of that in the world, it seems, because, a lot of the time, you run into people that have these massive egos and,
Hmm.
like what you're saying is valuable. I appreciate it, but I wish that it did not come with the self-aggrandizing kind of stuff, But when you find people like Denis and Lon who are able to convey all this information in a very understandable, humble way, you just can't help but feel a little bit lighter.
Yeah.
There's something that is kind of enriching about it, where you see them, person to person, where
Hmm.
even keel kind of thing. But also you have to have so much respect for the knowledge that they do have because
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. That's such a great point. It's like because it feels like, oh, you could walk up to either of them and
Yeah.
it you can feel like equal par, even though you're like you have so much knowledge and you have, but they're not gonna like be a dick to you.
Oh no, well, no, because a la see, real mystics of social media kind of thing.
Right.
But
Oh man. Yeah, the reason I even brought that up was because we were talking the micro, macro, and then Lon was discussing in that interview about Enochian uh,
yes.
magic, and he was talking about the whole process of it is essentially understanding sort of the macro thinking of angels, and you're like, what?
Yeah, yeah. And they're just like, hey, by the way, let me infiltrate your brain for a little bit and like show you how outlandish the world outside of your understanding is.
Yes, for
Yeah, it's
sure.
nuts.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. And it was so funny because my husband, he's his own mystic. He does his own
Hmm.
thing. But he was so funny because we were both watching that interview, and then he was like, "Oh yeah, he's been like dragged around by angelic beings. Like, look at this," and
Oh
then
my
give
God.
just given that knowledge, and he's like, "Yeah, it's like a freaking clock." Okay, yeah, it's just too funny.
That's
Um,
awesome.
oh gosh, yeah. So you had all these experiences as a kid,
Hmm.
then started doing some ghost hunting.
Hmm.
Did you have like any support from anybody be with you or around you, or was it like books, or kind of how did you, in addition to the ghost hunting, kind of get through?
Well, I will tell you, there were a lot of very poorly designed HTML sites at that point in time. It's like blackmagic.com with like a
Right.
with a clip art torch, kind of
Oh
doing
my
its
gosh.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Classic.
looks like RuneScape or something,
Yeah.
you know. There's a lot of that, but also, um, I did turn, at times to other texts, I would, go to, the Torah and see what
Mm.
the Jewish scriptures would say about, death and the beyond and all that.
Yeah.
And then, reading a little bit of the Gita and, just various other religious sources, kind of go through there and try to get a broader idea of what other religions think in
Yeah.
terms of those lines, in terms of what happens to the human soul and everything.
Hmm.
Because, at that point in my life, I wasn't very convinced of the two place argument, that
Right.
there's, the upstairs and the downstairs, right? But then it's like, oh wait, there's actually reincarnation, or there's just, another place altogether, which it's kind of like the underworld, but it's not bad, kind of like in Greek mythology. It's not
Right.
necessarily bad.
Yeah.
If you're a bad person, it can be really bad. But
Hmm.
if you're just a dude, you're probably just walking around in the dark a little bit and taking a nap, maybe. I don't know. So, I would approach it that way where
Hmm.
I would look at various systems and try to compare. Um, and then in terms of people that I had around me, the I think the biggest, partner that kind of helped me through that was actually there was a guy who his name was John. He ran a shop in our town called Enchanted Gifts. And he had, books on various types of mysticism and magic and, had amulets and pendants and swords and all this other stuff. It was just a very eclectic kind of place. And then, of course, they had, those dragon statues and all that
Oh
stuff,
yeah.
like the early 2000s and all that. So I would sometimes go to John because he was part of a local coven, I believe. And I had, I was, 13, 14-year-old kid, and I just would had questions and I'd go to him and I would ask certain things and he would provide a lot of very balanced and, very thoughtful types of answers to the questions that I had.
Hmm.
So I kind of looked at him as a guide a little bit, whenever I had a chance to go into the store because, he always had very insightful perspectives, as compared to a lot of the other stuff, the church community and everything else. And, my friends were never really too much into that kind of stuff. Well, save one friend of mine who is, he would go ghost hunting with me a lot.
Hmm.
He'd bring his camera and everything. But um, in terms of exploring, esotericism and the occult, it was kind of just me, going through a lot of that. And so anytime I could go to Enchanted Gifts, I would, and, get some insight.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, the people that own those like those types of stores are
Hmm.
such a what do I want? I was gonna a refuge. I was gonna say
Hmm.
refuse. I was like, that's the word.
No.
Refuge. Yeah, a refuge for people for sure,
Yeah.
looking for alternative things. Yeah, that's so cool that you had that in your community. That's awesome.
Yeah. And I've had good and bad experiences with various other shops, but
Oh
with
yeah,
him,
yeah.
it was always great. He's always a good guy. But
Aw.
um, and then the eventually it got to the point where I was kind of looking at like Book of Shadows stuff, doing like journaling and everything, and doing meditations to try to get some sort of visionary experience and everything. And was kind of muddling together, you know, a a half-baked Christian perspective and a half-baked Wiccan perspective.
Hmm.
I was young, but
Yeah.
it's all part of growth. But
Hmm.
but yeah, so a lot of that was there, and then experimenting also with a couple of things like praying to angels and saints and trying to like have intercessions and things like that when I was young,
Hmm.
just to try to go outside of the understandings that I had to see a little bit more of the world of entities that are, all around.
Yeah. Yeah. So you kind of did your own sort of exploration, kind of felt your way through it, sounds like.
I tried to,
Yeah, pretty much
to
what
varying
everybody
degrees of
does.
success, to varying degrees.
Yeah. That's the journey for sure. Pretty much it's like I've interviewed quite a few different people from different doing what they're doing. It's pretty much what happens. Everybody just starts kind of looking at different religions or they kind of try meditation and they, see what's kind of working for them.
Hmm.
And then the path opens up at some point.
Yes, yes. And
So
and that path is sometimes obscure, but yet we
yes.
have to walk it anyway.
Oh
And
yeah.
it
You're
doesn't even
like,
feel like you're on a road, but
right, exactly. It's like I think I'm swimming
yeah.
sometimes.
Am I swimming? Am I walking? Am I
Yeah.
dreaming?
Yeah. Like I don't even know what space I'm in for sure. Definitely fun. Um, gosh, I do. So during this time, was there any sort of books that you were kind of like you would recommend to somebody sort of starting out that you were reading?
So, a lot of it was so much informed by, you know, early 2000s and like early 2010s internet that
Oh yeah.
I was kind of like, I was kind of bouncing around between various sources, some good and some bad.
Oh,
Um,
gotcha.
I mean, later on, though, I mean, I started looking into Agrippa and I started looking into, various other mystical approaches, like, say, the Cloud of Unknowing, which, Denis very, you know, very graciously provided us with that review that he was featured on when he wrote the introduction to that book. And,
Yeah.
you know, I started looking into that. And then I also, I kind of approach things from a little bit more of a philosophical perspective. So
Hmm.
actually, there's books that are way too long and sometimes hard to read, but Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit
Oh.
is very it's a very good way to try and understand the human being in the world and how the changes in time throughout our experience are a series of forces colliding together to make a synthesis.
Mm.
Combination.
Hmm.
So it's like all of these, these contrary forces and ideas are, constantly in conflict with each other. And then eventually there is what he calls sublation that where eventually they fuse together. And then from there, the wheel of history just continues to churn with all of these conflicts, eventually resolving into a synthesis or into a
Oh.
sublation or a unity. And so that's definitely, at least I'd recommend that book. Uh, it's the he wrote it in German back in like the Napoleonic era, and so like the translations, depending on which one you get, might be kind of difficult because he uses a lot of technical jargon and all that. But if you're willing to slog through it, or if you want to go through the audiobook, found that helpful.
Hmm.
That is something I definitely recommend. I also have a huge soft spot for Albert Camus, the existentialists and everything, because they were the ones that are asking a lot of these big questions of like, what is the purpose of human existence in the world, and what is my place in this grand emergence of, cosmic materia and everything. And what is their purpose? I don't know. And then, of course, with the myth of Sisyphus, he talks about, one must think Sisyphus happy rolling the boulder up the hill, where you have to continue to try to make your own meaning out of it, despite the fact that there's no indication otherwise from the greater world that there is a, larger plan or purpose. We have to
Mm.
continue to make our own. And that,
Right.
so a lot of that, I think, a lot of my approach to esotericism is very much informed by that, where it's like, well, on one hand, the rational side of me sees the world as this amalgamation of forces and things and events and all this stuff, but and what it might necessarily mean. Then the other side of me, thinks, the more metaphysically inclined side would think, well, there has to be relationships between all of this, and there has to be a greater force at play that I can tap into and engage with. And so it's kind of straddling that line. And through the process is, trying to make sense of yourself through self-knowledge and exploration. And so
Hmm.
a lot of that is very much intrinsically informed by existentialism in a way, because we have to first know our position before we can know anything else.
Right. Yeah. Like, how do you move? How do you
Exactly.
move anywhere if you don't know where you're at?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, and I could be completely wrong. I could be, you know, just, completely blind to the fact that I'm a reincarnated soul from 1639 and maybe, I don't know. But so far as I can tell,
Hmm.
as far as I can tell, we just have to work on what we have
Yeah.
and try our best to construe the best of what we can from it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think that's a good perspective because then it's just, yeah, then the rest of it is like, okay, that's cool.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. But I gotta do this right in front of me right now.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh man. Um, yeah, I did want to definitely talk about sort of your evolution into music for
Yes,
sure.
of course, of
So,
course.
would you like to talk about, especially, your project that's really cool, The Given Ghost?
Yeah.
Listen to some of the tracks, which are really cool. Like I love contemplative, meditative music.
Hmm.
Yours has like a different layer to it that I think is really cool because you have like the soundscapes,
Hmm.
which is kind of shamanic in a lot of ways, for sure. It feels very more shamanic than like a meditation, um, but in a good way. It's like you can just kind of let it take you,
Yeah,
which I
and
really
and
like.
actually I love that because,
Hmm.
you know, it's when you're creating music like that, a lot of the time, you can go for, purely pleasant sounds that are
Yeah,
relaxing,
right.
and that can be useful. But there's also another side of it where, at least in my own perspective, with composing, you have to, kind of, if you want people to have both attention toward the music and also having a an experience with it, through
Hmm.
calming effects, but also intrigue. You have to kind of
Yeah,
throw in some elements there that have a little bit of grit and maybe a little bit of, peculiarity and strangeness,
yeah,
and try to, you know, get the attention to. gravitate towards that and figure out what's going on. But then eventually from that, you end up kind of becoming hypnotized a little bit. And the process of creating it is definitely hypnotic because
Right. Yeah.
like I'd spent hours just going through a mix and just listening to the same thing over and over again. And just like you're kind of in a trance where
Right.
you're just like eventually you're looking at this thing and you're like, this is creating itself. I'm not doing anything, right? Because you're just
Yeah.
in that state of mind on that frequency where you're just creating and interfacing directly with this thing that came from yourself, slowly emerging out into the world.
Hmm.
And in terms of, musical beginnings and stuff, because I know that we wanted to touch on that. Um, Oddly enough, uh, my initial interest when I was young, because I never took music lessons or anything when I was a kid, until I hit 11. I was never in a family that made me practice the piano or made me play certain instrument, right?
Hmm.
Initially, I was interested in Taekwondo. Like I was like, hell yeah, like this is cool. Like, sparring, karate, like doing punches and kicks and, all that stuff. That's awesome. And I was doing that for a while and got my orange belt. And eventually, the studio that I was doing that at, went up to my dad and they're like, "Hey, okay, yeah, so this is great. So first year was awesome. Second year it's going to be $2,000, and keep in mind at that point in time it was 2004, and he was like, nope, we're not
That's a
doing
lot. Yeah.
a lot of money back in 2004,
Yeah.
and so he was like, no, we're not doing that. So then shortly after that actually, a family friend was having a garage sale, and I went over there and I saw that they had this old four-string bass, electric bass from, the 70s maybe. It kind of still had a little bit of the kind of tobacco stain on the
Mm.
fingerboards and everything, you know. And I was like, that is cool. That is freaking awesome. And so like I saw that and immediately was like, I want to play that. I want to learn how to play that, right?
Hmm.
And so they sold it to us for like $50 and then from there, I had this thing and I was messing around with it and asked, my parents to get lessons for it. And my dad, being the, very, you know, practical kind of guy that he said, okay, well, listen, you need to kind of prove to me that you want to do this. So you're going to have to learn a few things on your own before I'll invest, money into pay for lessons.
Hmm.
And so I did. So I learned, Come Together from the Beatles and all this other stuff. And eventually he's like, all right, yeah, you've put your time in, let's get you lessons. And so then from there, my teacher, his name's Dan, he taught me for about 5 or 6 years actually. And he had told me that if I wanted to do anything in college pertaining to playing bass or being in music, I'd probably need to learn something akin to a classical instrument. So
Mm.
I learned the upright and started playing in orchestra in high school and eventually college and all that. And then, learning music theory and composition and all that stuff. And, just over the years, my love for the art has just grown so much. And it's weird to think that the origins were me at a garage sale. Like
Hmm.
there's something to be said about looking back and seeing how all the cards were stacked and you think like, man, like that was the beginning of it. Like that, like I just saw an instrument in someone's driveway. And then it just spurred all of this to, this album and, every other musical project I've been involved in that, has just been so incredibly meaningful. It's just
Hmm.
interesting to see oneself throughout time and how all these things end up developing, how it's just a big tapestry that's being rolled out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's such a good, well, a good connection point because, yeah, when you're explaining that, it's like, yeah, when you do look back at your life, you're like, yeah, that one thing, if I wasn't there, or that didn't happen, or I didn't see the guitar, like, where would I be? And it just seemed so innocuous at the time. You're just like,
Hmm.
la, 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 la.
Yeah.
wandering by. Um, yeah, so it is like, is it planned? Is it chaos? I don't
Yeah.
know, but it was right in front of you.
Yeah,
And
exactly. Exactly.
yeah.
And, you know, I wouldn't be opposed to the idea of there being, kind of a, guiding shove or
Yeah. Oh
nudge,
yeah.
towards certain
Yeah.
things,
Yeah.
because, I there are just certain things that happen during our lives where it almost feels like it's a tidal, like kind of a rip tide that's kind of just
Mm-hmm.
pulling you in. Where it's like I'm being sucked in. There's nothing I can do about it. Like this is awesome. Like
Right. Yeah, like I guess. Yeah.
all of the forces around me are pulling me in a direction. I just need to go. You know.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Yeah.
part of the, being involved in, the esoteric is being able to read out that kind of stuff and feel
Yes.
those kinds of tendencies and patterns is just being able to know when you're in a certain gravitational orbit and that you're coming in, being sucked in
Mm-hmm.
toward a certain potentiality and eventuality when it becomes manifest. You're like, okay, well, yep, I'm here. This is what's going to happen. I'm on my way. See you guys later. I'm ready.
Yes. Oh gosh, yeah, beautifully explained. Yeah, I've been trying to like articulate that to for myself and other people, but that's such a good explanation. Yeah, the way I've like sort of formed it in my mind is like railroad tracks in a
Hmm.
way, but the
Hmm.
railroad tracks, I like for me the railroad tracks make sense because I always think of like the old in time movie reels where you have to see the little guy run up and actually has to pull
Yeah,
the
yeah.
thing to
Oh
switch
my
the track.
God.
So it's like there's got to be a little bit of effort, but then the track is on the right track. And then you see, kind of have an idea of where the end should be and what you're visualizing, the manifestation part.
Hmm.
Yeah. And it is like feeling that's all magicians are doing, man. We're just like feeling the
Yeah.
potentialities. Like, which one do I want? Because like there's too many choices.
Yeah. Well, and that's, and that's
Yeah.
part of it being that we're these, time, we are these creatures of time.
Yeah.
And, with that comes certain limitations and certain kinds of structures where we have to make a choice
Hmm.
within those limitations to do certain things because,
Yeah.
save the, idea that we're being reincarnated infinitely
Sure.
in this life.
Yeah.
I don't know that.
I don't
And so it's like right now, there's so many
know.
choices. There's an infinite number of them. I
Yes.
really just need to make a decision about which one is
Exactly.
best one for the times that I'm in now because
Yeah.
you don't get another try sometimes. And you're like, okay, well, I just have to try
Yeah.
to do this. But and sometimes with that comes discernment, because we have
Mm-hmm.
so many thoughts kicking around in our head at any given time that, and our desires are, pull us in various directions and everything to where
Yes.
eventually having a certain clarity around that. And I think that this is what the practice helps you with is being able
Yeah.
to try to discern what direction you need to go in per the higher self or the
Hmm.
HGA or the ancestors or whichever forces are kind of propelling you toward a better life.
Yeah.
You have to kind of be in touch with yourself at that point to be able to try to make that determination because
Yes.
everything is a chaos of sensation and desires and thoughts and everything. It's it's madness. But
Yes.
but
Yes.
if you're able to kind of tap in a little bit to those subtle forces
Hmm.
and it'll help you reach a better place and reach a better place of understanding to make the better choices to move more gracefully throughout time.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. Again, beautifully explained. I love that. And especially I guess now I definitely still want to talk because there's so much great stuff about your music and like even the
Yes.
name The
Yeah,
Giving
I know.
Ghost.
I
I
keep getting
definitely
us off track a
no, no,
little
no.
bit.
I'm This is what we do here. It's fine.
Yeah, okay.
It's totally fine. I'm definitely going to keep it in there. I have it as my note. But because you mentioned subtle forces, and I know one of the things we're going to chat about is planetary energies, my favorite,
Yes.
and specifically Mars and Aries.
Hmm.
So, like, where do you want to start with that? Like, what's your experience with Mars and Aries that you were kind of
Well,
for 3 years?
well, I got a lot. Um,
Yeah.
mainly because, if you look at it from the zodiacal perspective, um, in terms of my chart and everything,
Hmm.
I got a lot of Scorpio. Like
That's
it's a lot. It's, 6 planets worth. It's a lot. And so,
yikes.
yeah, I know. Which when I learned that, when I was learning the significance of it and the symbolic interplay of, sign to planet and the
Hmm.
mythologies of those things, I wanted to try to understand it a little bit more.
Right.
What does, the importance of a Mars rulership traditionally with this sign mean?
Hmm.
So I was looking into it and, I came across the Arbitel and, that was actually kind of my first, dipping my toes in a little bit was
Hmm.
looking at the way that the Arbitel lays out evocation because it's simple. There's no, I mean, it's not necessary to have a bunch of, accoutrements and, ritual, regalia and, everything else, Golden Dawn style. You don't necessarily need to do that.
Right.
Obviously there's the bell and, waiting until sunrise and, reading Psalms and everything. But
Yeah.
I kind of went about it a different way because, oddly enough, because the planet that you're dealing with is that of imposing limitations.
Hmm.
Sometimes things happen that get in the way of the perfect circumstances, right?
Right.
So, I had been doing readings with tarot and everything to try to figure out because I was exploring astrology and, the natal chart and all this stuff and also learning tarot. And I was like, okay, so I'm asking the deck, like, okay, so what should I be working with? What should I be looking for? What should I be doing? And Mars just kept coming up, just consistently. And so,
Wow.
okay, so like this is what I have to do. So, and then I come across the Arbitel and, I ended up trying to do my best rendition of what that might be, right? For
Yeah.
calling, an Olympic spirit of the sphere of Mars, right? And
Hmm.
uh I will tell you, I was wanting to do it on, in the way that they describe in the book. I promise I tried, but uh as soon as I did, I woke up that morning, I was like, all right, I'm gonna do this. Eventually, or immediately my cat starts vomiting. It's like, sick. And
Classic. Yeah.
okay, yeah, I have to go to the vet. Okay, like this
Aw.
isn't happening right now. So, uh, shuttle him off to the vet and sit there for 4 or 5 hours. And,
Yeah.
very expensive, very
Mm.
worried, very,
Oh,
all.
yeah.
And, I'm trying to, figure out what I'm going to do with that. And then, a bunch of, and it was like, well, okay, the house is a mess. So I have to like make sure the house is in order, make sure I do all this stuff. All of these other things start emerging to where it's like a hindrance to
Right.
the intention of me wanting to do this thing that has, which the decks have been telling me like, hey, do this, you have to do this, right? So, or at least that's how I was interpreting it. And so eventually it gets to the point where it's like, okay, it's 7 p.m. that night. I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna do it. Like I'm just gonna do it because it almost seemed as though with all of the things that were emerging that day, because I was also getting a phone call, it was like, hey, by the way, I have COVID, and hey, but like literally just like family members were calling me, like it was
Why
insane.
today?
Yeah, it's like, okay, well, today is definitely the day for doing that. Awesome. So and so it's 7 p.m. and I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna do it. And it was a lot different than anything else I'd ever done, in terms
Mm.
of the result of it, the bodily response. And there was some like clairaudience kind of stuff, like
Oh.
sound is kind of big for whenever I've done anything like that. And that was a lot more present than things that I had worked with in the past. And, you know, and it was almost as if, I was hearing ringing in my ear in response to questions. And so it's like a very loud, like resonant ring that was like felt close to me, and my, oral
Yeah.
perception was like a yes.
Mm-hmm.
A more distant but palpable is like a no, or like, so
Yeah.
it's like, and but also there's the bodily, people have talked about bodily pressure when you're,
Yes.
experiencing that, and that was definitely there. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so that's definitely something that had occurred too.
Yeah.
And I walked away from that afterwards with kind of a foot in the door where, there was this contact that I had that I could kind of ask questions to and
Yeah.
try to be like, okay, like, so, what does this mean? What's this? What kind of knowledge could I gain from this? What is your nature? All of these things. And so from that 3 years ago, as well as everything else that's ensued since, I've kind of come to, at least I hope, a somewhat informed, place.
Yeah.
Um, and that is that Mars is not, and I repeat, it is not a planet of machismo, is not a planet of being a barbarian and being hyper violent. And I feel as though oftentimes people get that wrong.
Mm-hmm.
People often, and obviously it's the warrior archetype,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's, a place for it. But I feel like it's not really capturing the full scope of what that archetype is.
Mm-hmm.
Because I told you before, but the warrior poet as an archetype exists for a reason.
Right.
There's both the, noble soldier that also has emotional knowledge and understanding of oneself and one's circumstances. It's not solely being a, bloodlust driven individual. It's more so having a balance of knowing to act when you need to
Right.
and to try to balance oneself in the midst of an unpredictable world, and
Mm-hmm.
to try to do that in a strategic way for the purpose of peace. That's
Right.
why they're in the Arvitel, they describe Phaleg, the spirit of Mars, as the Prince of Peace, which
Mm.
is at one point, it seems ironic
Right.
if you have the perspective of like, okay, well, Mars is a warmonger that wants to engage in warfare. Like that's crazy.
Right.
But when you start kind of unraveling the, I guess, the archetypes and the mythologies around it, what you end up having is a much more, oh, I guess, a much more humanized view of what
Mm-hmm.
it is for Mars. Because if you go through the numerology and the Kabbalistic associations, so the number five is Mars's, the planet Mars's, position in the tree of life. In the tarot, all of the minor arcana is associated with Gebra and five, with Mars.
Mm-hmm.
However, five is also the number of the pentagram. It's the number of of the elements coming together, and through their coalescence, bringing about spirit. So
Right.
in in that very in that wheelhouse is also a martial association, where if we imagine ourselves kind of like how they do in a kripa, where
Mm-hmm.
you have the fivefold part of the body with the head, the arms, and the legs, representing the human being. That is an expression of martial archetype because of the numerological associations and because of the very fact that it's, an expression of humanity itself. And
Right.
and so the way that I've come to understand it from all of this is actually, I'll backtrack. If you look at the sigil of Mars,
Mm-hmm.
the circle and the arrow, those are technically two objects. You have the shield circle and then the spear that is the arrow looking object in the sigil.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about what those symbols mean, the spear is an imparting force. It is one that goes out
Yeah.
to pierce. The shield is a receiving force because it's receiving battering from
Right.
outside. And so from there, you have kind of a twofold relationship between, say, Aries being the active principle of fire with the piercing and imparting,
Hmm.
yet Scorpio as the shield being the receiving since it's water. And so you have the two primal elements represented in the sigil itself.
Right.
And from there, you start to see a little bit more the side of a more humane but yet still relatable side of that energy.
Hmm.
And from there, if you are to look at Mars from a more complicated, or not complicated, complex and nuanced point of view, what you end up getting is an analog to our own experience. We are these five-fold beings that are in the world, you know, full of limitations, or actually rather imposing our own limitations because
Mm.
Hesed is coming over on one side with all of its boundlessness. We have
Right.
to try to make sense of that by making our own boundaries, our own limitations, so that way we can try to operate within it, because otherwise it'd be chaos.
Yeah.
And of course, you have, Bina up top. And so it's us trying to battle the chaos of the outside world, but also, if you look at the tree of life, looking upward and seeing time, eventual death, all of
Right.
that in Bina. And so in reality, Gebera and Mars is an expression of our lived experience of living in within the realities of knowing that life will bring pain, that it'll bring loss, and that it'll bring violence potentially, or that it'll bring just general suffering. But
Hmm.
that would be that acknowledgement would be more the watery side of it, of the
Right.
shield, knowing that all those things are going to come.
Yeah.
But then the fiery side of it is the will toward self-preservation and trying to navigate through that despite the fact that there's going to be suffering, despite the fact that there's going to be pain, and despite the fact that eventually we all die. You know,
Hmm.
that's why, in a way, Stoicism is actually very much a martial philosophy. You have people like Marcus Aurelius and all the Stoic guys, they
Hmm.
are essentially the ones that are trying to tell you like, hey, you're going to experience a lot of bad stuff. But the only thing that you can try to do is control how you respond to things and how you navigate the world. That's the only thing you can do because otherwise you're just building yourself up for more suffering. And so, in a way, Gebera and Mars is an acceptance of that reality and knowing that you have to press on anyway because there's a sense of responsibility that comes with it to yourself and other people.
Yeah.
And so, the notion of protecting oneself, protecting the things that you should protect, and striving forward despite pain and
Hmm.
despite, you know, loss. Because, on a personal note, I've lost a lot of people to, various things, people that were young. And I think that it helped me realize through this work that those limitations, even though they're difficult and even though they're painful, it's it's a refining, kind of a sharpening of a blade almost. With every painful event that comes, a little bit sloughs off you like you're sharpening a knife
Yeah.
against a stone. And it's in its own right is a form of alchemical transformation.
Hmm.
That suffering can be that is at one point in time I would have thought that was unthinkable. But it becomes the ever refining part of the self to experience those things.
Hmm.
And that's kind of what I've learned through all of it
Yeah.
is that it's not, even though it does represent the prime masculine cosmic force within all of us as it is expressed in all of us, it is our lived experience going through a world where there's chaos and uncertainty and trying to live anyway.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's beautifully explained. I don't think I've ever heard anybody explain it like that. And it's
Well, I
really well done. Yeah.
well, I mean, I hope it makes sense because it's
Yeah.
it plays a lot into the music as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because the whole project really is to try to see the parts of ourselves that we've lost, you know, because through time, we're constantly experiencing, the eternal present.
Yeah.
But in memory, we have all of these internal images and all of these inner, memories of experiences and people and places and all of that that just kind of resonate in our insides in a way. Like they're all still there.
Yeah.
But even though in manifest reality, they're not, you know,
Mm-hmm.
in the realm of the unmanifest inside, they're still there. And so, and we constantly forget ourselves. Every moment that passes is another thought of, sensation or desire. And we often forget that those core moments and those key individuals and places and significant moments are what propelled us to where we are now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not so much a nostalgia as it is an attempt to try to see how broad we really are. That these ghosts of the past, these ghosts of experience that internalize and embed themselves within us, it's a way to try to remember that we are more than just a current moment, that we span throughout, the breadth of time.
Mm-hmm.
And that all of these things, even though they're lost in this nebulous realm of the unmanifest, that through memory, they are still there. And even though it's fractured and ruined and broken at times, you can still feel love for those things and love for that part of your life and for those people and for those events. And that's actually, in a way, there's a little bit of relationship shadow work because, you know, not all memories are good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sometimes there's trauma and there's very negative experiences that people have. But through this type of contemplation that I hope that the music can inspire is one where you can confront those things in a much more controlled and accepting kind of way, where you can, if you feel that pain again, you can look at it and say, yes, this may have been incredibly destructive at the time, but it contributed so much to the development of who I am now. And,
Mm-hmm.
and you almost end up having a love for those things, even though they were negative.
Right.
You almost end up transmuting those types of negative experiences into something that is heartfelt, that you can feel a resonance toward, where you can forgive either the other person or yourself, and it can become somewhat healing in that way. But all that to say, um, the whole explanation for it is that the ghosts that we're given are experience through memory, and that we get them all the time. We have a whole bunch of ghosts living up in us all the
Mm-hmm.
time,
Yeah.
and they're everywhere. And we forget about them sometimes. But, there are times where certain types of music or certain mind-altering things that we can do can help us see the broader part of ourselves and
Mm-hmm.
our place within time and within the context of the world, and to have a little bit more of an understanding of ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I know we were talking about the how you got the name The Given Ghost and before we started talking and
Yeah.
then yeah,
Yeah.
so you were able to kind of explain that now with that idea of like the memories that we all hold and whether they be people or like things that happened in the past, whether they be positive or negative, um, that you in the present, like you get to think about those things. And that's kind of
Yeah.
that's kind
Well,
of awesome in a
well,
way.
and not only that though, is
Yeah.
that you can also traverse outside, because
Right.
if you're exploring the realms of the unmanifest, obviously the past is the easiest place to look for kind of a
Yeah.
mythical exploration of the self, but you can also kind of look out and, obviously it's through the lens of experience always,
Hmm.
it's always
Yeah.
through firsthand kind of subjective phenomenology, but you can try to understand the impressions that you receive outside. And that's
Right.
kind of what the album is in a way through Fluid Numina, is to try to make sense of experience of these unknown things as they're being presented to you, almost like in the cloud of unknowing, when you knock upon a cloud of unknowing, to put reason aside and to let impression and the heart kind of dictate the things that are
Mm.
coming to you. And so
Yeah.
it was kind of the byproduct of that practice of contemplation, of trying to receive these numinous, soulful impressions to describe experience, to describe
Mm.
it, the process itself and our place in it.
Ah, wow, that's so beautifully said. Yeah, I have the cloud of of unknowing. Like I have it on my shelf. I have not read it yet, but now I'm like, I gotta read it because
It's so good. I mean, there's
yeah.
obviously there's the a lot of, medieval,
Hmm.
monk stuff.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
talking about,
Yeah. I
the
like that
path
stuff.
of, yeah, you know, um, like the path of Margaret and Mary, and or I think Mary's sister's name's Margaret. I can't remember, but it's been a while since I've read it. But
Hmm.
there's all that stuff in relation to scripture. But when
Yeah.
you get down to the brass tacks, that's kind of what the method is allowing
Mm.
yourself to just accept and try to unify with that unknown force that's out there
Yeah.
in order to try to receive impressions.
Yes. The receiving is the hardest. For me, it was the hardest. Like, um, so I was getting anyway, I won't go into every detail, but I was getting messages from my guides, my ancestors. They
Hmm.
were like, your mind, your heart, not in line.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
not in, and so they were like, you need to balance it like
Hmm.
together. And if anything, the other message I was getting is your heart is actually a little bit more important than your mind.
Well, yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, because in waking life, I mean, we're
Yeah.
constantly trying to use rational faculties in
Oh
order to
God.
make,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
order to make pragmatic decisions. But, at the end of the day, there, the heart kind of takes a back seat a lot of the time.
Yes. Yeah.
And, when you're sitting there in bed staring at the ceiling, that's when the heart makes itself known.
Mm.
Like, hey, by the way, I'm still here, and you're in a lot of pain, and here's here's some stuff that you probably need to think about. And you're like, oh no, I won't think about that.
Yeah.
I'd rather be stressed about work, right?
Right.
Like I'd rather be
Totally. Yeah.
I'd rather be trying to think how I'm gonna take my cat to the vet or whatever.
Yeah.
No, 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 I'm still here, and you have a lot of feelings that you need to feel,
Yeah.
and so, sometimes it's hard to make that balance because,
Oh gosh.
experience is so multi-layered and there's so many domains of human experience where there's the thinking and the feeling faculties, and then there's, dreaming, all this stuff. We operate on so many levels that it's hard to have a certain one not take primacy, especially
Right.
living in a physical world. You need to
Yeah.
be be rational about it. But then it's like
Hmm.
there's that part of you that is constantly, either longing or feels as though it's not completely whole yet, or
Hmm.
it's trying to send you a message that
Yeah.
you need to consider certain things and that you might need to sit with certain feelings. And, oftentimes we ignore that too much, I think. I think that especially in the West, we are very much go, go, go kind of people. It's a very
Hmm.
type A type of society where it tries to
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
And, you
Right.
know, but it doesn't leave a lot of room at times for us to think about, the emotional impacts of, not being able to sit with one's emotions and not being able to
Hmm.
try and explore it. And that's why there's such a big push for therapy and stuff, is because a lot of
Yeah.
the time people just they don't have the skills to, try to, or they haven't been taught the skills by the culture they live in to
Yeah.
explore stuff on their own.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Oh, so many things you said. I'm kind of trying to, because this is looping back in for me for the Mars Aries discussion again, because we were talking
Hmm.
about tarot, and somebody asked me, I'm going to say who it was,
Hmm.
because I think he listens sometimes. It is Matt, my trainer, my personal trainer.
Hmm. Yeah.
He always asks me questions because he'll listen to, anyway. he was like, so what is, he was like, so what's the evil tarot card, right? He's like, what is the number? What or no? He was like, what's the evil tarot card? What's an evil number, right? An evil number.
Hmm.
And I said, oh, I took a big sigh, like, well, it's not evil.
I promise.
I
Yeah.
promise it's not, but
Yeah.
it's people would consider five, right? For all
Hmm.
the reasons you said. But it's because five, if you look at in the tarot, Rider
Hmm.
Waite Smith, the five is the thing that upturns everything. It steps in there and makes you look at things. It like
Yes.
turns whatever, because you were saying like, your heart lying in bed, it wants to be realized,
Yeah.
maybe that's what's happening sometimes is like in the upturning of five, the action of five, that's where
Yeah.
that like making itself known, like you are
Hmm.
not listening to
Yeah.
me.
No, and
Yeah.
actually, if I was because I was thinking about this, in preparation for our conversation, and
Yeah.
an image came to my mind where it's like, okay, so thinking about the number five and how that ends up, developing some of these emotional pains and
Right.
how we deal with them, and ultimately, the uprooting and destruction of things, as well as the development of new things, everything, all that. The image that
Mm.
came to my mind was, imagine a wheel, the pentagram, right?
Yeah.
But the top is weighted more than the rest. What
Mm.
happens? It's asymmetrical. It spins down,
Yes.
down. And so, like, it starts spinning in a very kind of haphazardous way that asymmetry ends up producing these changes, which,
Mhm.
if we're trying to maintain stability, you know,
Right.
for human beings, stability is important.
Yeah.
But sometimes that wheel just turns because of the asymmetrical number, the asymmetrical shape or weight and distribution, where changes start happening. It's like everything's being destroyed. Like, oh no, like the tower's in disrepair and it's crumbling. Like, oh my God.
Yeah.
But, that's that's part of it. That's part of it is that intrinsic knowledge that things eventually end up falling apart. And,
Hmm.
you know, there's also now that you bring up the number five, actually, I have to kind of throw in, the reference to the Pixies, if
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
man is five and the devil is six,
Yes.
you
That's a
know,
good song.
yeah, I heard that song when I was young, and I was like, oh well, maybe, humanity's number is five, and then that kind of, looped back in. We're like, oh, actually, no, they were right, like like in a way, like they were actually kind of right because, you know, five senses, at least on face, right?
Right.
But all of these things end up developing, into this fivefold being that we are with, and kind of fractaled in a way because, on each appendage we have five digits and everything else. And so like, oh man, like actually, no, this makes perfect sense. Mars is a representation of humanity trying to pursue stability and peace through chaos and everything. So
Yeah.
it's it's that thing. And now obviously, disclaimer, of course, there is a time and place for being protective and violent and macho and whatever. There's a place for that. It's not
Hmm.
usually in everyday life though.
Right.
And so like there are plenty of influencers and things like that that go out and try to convey themselves as a raw meat only diet person that works out 8 days a week and, is incredibly virile and is, an alpha or whatever, right? But that's actually, at least to my understanding, it's very much an unbalanced view of what this archetype is. It's kind
Hmm.
of a misunderstanding of it in a way, at least in
Right.
because really what that is, they're ignoring the heart part of that. They're
Hmm.
simply trying to exude the fiery, will part of like, I'm going to be X person. I'm going to be, perfect and impose domination and impose my physique and impose my superiority. But behind all of that is a heart that likely hasn't been tended to in a long time.
Oh God, yeah.
And, that's a problem with masculinity generally in our
Hmm.
culture, and
Yeah.
and that's part of it because like I'm not like a super masculine man. Like I work out sometimes. I shot guns when I was young and went hunting a few times, loved fishing, whatever, but
Yeah.
enjoy drinking a beer and going to a baseball game. But like I wouldn't consider myself to be this like macho, machismo kind of guy. And so when trying to approach it from the perspective of like what does it mean to be, so embroiled in this kind of masculine force, when you start exploring Mars is that it's like, oh, well, actually, no, it's not just what these, meathead influencers are doing. It's actually a whole lot of other stuff. And, you have to have a reason why you fight for stuff. And you don't have to fight all the time because if you fight all the time, you die. And if all this, it's like it's a constant balancing act. You have to know what you're going to go to bat for, and you have to know what's valuable to try to protect in the first place,
Hmm.
So, and
Yeah.
that's where the heart comes in.
Yes. It's so true. Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I think we were Discord chatting about
Hmm.
our signs, and I was like, yeah, my ascendant is Mars or Aries, and
Hmm.
my sun is a Pisces, which is like a hilarious combination
Oh
to
man.
me, which is like,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Oh my
yeah,
God. Yeah. No, I'm sorry. That's hard.
yeah, it's hard. It's hard because it's like, I have my like nice, sweet Piscean nature, but man,
Hmm.
when I get in a certain way, it's like that anger comes out.
It's
And
like,
it's kind of like what you said, it's like looking back on my past life, and I'm still learning. I'm not like perfect in any way.
hmm.
But seeing the battles I did fight that were like, why the hell did I fight that?
Right.
That was like not worth my time.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And,
Yeah.
with that, I mean, I have some Aries people in my life. I love them to death. And, and I get it from the perspective of like, some kinship there with the common planetary rulership and everything, right?
Hmm.
With that symbolism. And,
Yes.
I think about it, I'm like, yeah, I'm like, oh man, like I know what you're doing. I understand it, but man, we gotta do something else sometimes. Like,
But chill it out a little.
we gotta, we, we can't be doing this all the time.
Right.
Like,
Like, this is very exhausting, just so you know.
well,
Like,
yeah,
my
it's like
God.
you're gonna tie yourself out.
Yes, for
We have a
sure.
cat who's Aries. I'm like, oh man, like,
Well, my husband is an Aries sun. So it's
mhm.
like, but I think that's probably why we get along because my ascendant
Well,
is
yeah.
in Aries.
But I
Uh,
actually have a good friend that I made from the Discord who's an
oh,
Aries. Fantastic guy. He's a
nice.
great dude. Um, and it's and again, that kind of expression of
Hmm.
domineering kind of
Yeah.
stuff. I mean
Yeah.
that those are in moments of
Right.
instability and imbalance. And so
Yes.
again, to look at one extreme of an archetype does not give an accurate picture of what it is.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and that's why we have to kind of have a little bit more of a more of a holistic approach. You know, you can
Mhm.
still hold on to your spear and stuff. You can keep it, just don't have to carry it around everywhere.
Yeah. You don't have to, yeah, exactly. It's not for everyday use.
Yeah,
Just
exactly. It's
unless
for
you're,
very specific uses, actually.
yes, right, exactly. Oh my gosh, it's too funny. Yeah, and I think we had this conversation. I think this was a conversation you and I and other people had on Denny on the Foolish Fish Discord was around like sort of like the book, The Art of War, right? Which
Mhm,
essentially when you
mhm.
read it, it's about not going to war.
Well, yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yes. So, if anything, I think, to me, it's like a perfect representation of sort of the energy that people don't understand about Mars or Aries is like, you actually don't want to exhaust all your energy in war. So you got to try to prevent war as much as possible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
and actually there's a great my favorite quote from that book.
Mhm.
Um I can't remember which numbered section it's in, but it's the quote where Sun Tzu says, if you know yourself and you know heaven, then you can make your victory complete. And so, the idea of that kind of union between the
Ah,
self and the outside, even if you have a different, you have to kind of recontextualize the definition of victory in certain
right.
situations because it's not always
Yeah.
war. But
Yeah.
you know, even if in the midst of failure, as long as you have that knowledge of both things, an acknowledgement of both things, and an attunement to both things, then you can, have a completed picture or a completed victory around certain parts of your life. So,
Right.
it's again, the warrior poet archetype of knowing yourself and knowing outside and trying to reach a union in order to
Hmm.
have a more holistic, not just better chances of success, but also to
Right.
have a more in-depth knowledge of yourself.
Yeah.
So, that I think is a perfect expression of what the more balanced martial perspective and archetype would be was just, know yourself, know heaven, look out, be
Yeah.
strategic, try not to go to war, you know,
Right.
try to avoid violence. If you have to, I guess you
Yeah.
you have to do what you
Do
have to
what you
do,
got to do. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
do your best to avoid it.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. We're human beings. Like I said, I'm always a work in progress. So
Oh
I try
yeah.
to take that pause of like, okay, do I really need to go and let my fire out right now? Or do I just need
Yeah.
to chill out?
It's like, do I need to hit the button right now?
Yeah.
The nuclear option? You're like, no, maybe not.
No,
Like,
no, not today. Not today.
maybe not today. I hope.
Yes, not today. Um, oh goodness, that's too funny. Yeah, so I guess gosh, there's so many things I want to talk about, but
Mhm.
um, how would you suggest for people to kind of work like for them to get to know Mars and Aries for themselves and
Mhm.
kind of explore it? What would be some suggestions?
So, I mean, the Arbitel is a great one,
Mm,
personally.
mhm,
Um, if you're looking more into evocation types of things, if that's the practice that you're going for. Another suggestion would be if you're looking to have more of a physical, understanding of it, joining a martial arts, studio, trying
mm,
to, pick one out, be kickboxing, Aikido, Taekwondo, karate, all that stuff. What that does is it teaches you discipline, and that's actually another big part that I hadn't touched on. But essentially, yeah, it teaches you discipline and respect.
mm,
It teaches you how to best use your body in order to achieve certain ends in a strategic and thoughtful way. So, engaging in a martial art, also it's good exercise. I mean, I need to get out and exercise more, honestly. For a
we
while
all do, don't
I
worry.
was working out on Tuesdays actually, and it was
Yeah,
very helpful. And it was like,
yeah,
yeah, good it's a good engine for working out because it's Mars Day, whatever.
yeah.
But so engaging with martial art would probably be another good way if you're not looking into the more the evocation side of it.
Hmm.
Another good resource I think would be to look into. So if you're into kind of neo-pagan stuff, you could look into Roman types of methods as well, because Mars was the god of the state more or less, historically, and so you can kind of look into what the Romans believed and
Mm,
how they kind of approached it. And of course, I'm sure there's stuff in the PGM. I haven't actually flipped through it in a while, but uh, there's that. And then there's also, I guess, if you're more into the goetic stuff, be careful, I guess. If you have no experience with that, just be careful and just
yeah.
use all precautions and everything. But
Hmm.
you can kind of go through there and find, because if you're more inclined to do infernal searchings under the tree, then that's fine. Just
Yeah.
if you've never done it before, just be careful. And similar to what Dania said before, it's like anything can really have a negative impact, right?
True. Yeah.
And a lot of it depends on the starting point of where you're beginning with those practices. But if that's more the wheelhouse of what you want to do, then make sure you have all the proper things laid out as they do in the Key of Solomon and everything, and
Yeah.
find, an entity that deals with that energy in a way.
Right.
Um, and then, if you don't want to go that route at all and you just want to do your own thing, which I completely get,
Yeah.
you could always do your own types of rituals. There's actually the book Planetary Magic by Denning and Phillips.
Oh, that's a
Uh,
good one. Yeah.
so you go there, I mean, and there's plenty of stuff in there that you can pull from that as well. So, and of course, if you're into Kabbalah, you could do more, like Sephirotic
Hmm.
angel types of evocations and stuff. And I think there was that book by Frater Ashen Hassan
Hmm.
uh, through I can't remember the name of the book, through Arch and
Oh, yeah, yeah,
I can't remember it. But yeah, like detailing his experiences
yeah.
with
Hmm.
following certain things.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily have as much experience with the Enochian stuff,
Hmm.
but if you're interested in doing that more kind of high magic kind of thing, there's definitely a lot of good stuff in there too.
Oh, yeah. Cool. Oh, yeah. So many good sources to look through for sure to kind of start experiencing your own Aries Mars energy for yourself.
Hmm.
I do hope that people do because there's a lot of stuff going on these days, everybody. And we don't
No,
understand what we're doing. We don't
absolutely.
know what we're doing.
Well, no, and
Yeah.
and actually now is as good a time as any to try to learn how you can best defend yourself,
Yeah.
secure your situation,
Yeah.
because things are scary out there, and
Yes.
anything that you can do to try to make sure that you're taking care of you and yours,
Hmm.
do the best you can, because at least in the US, there's a lot of stuff happening.
Right. Exactly.
I'll leave it at that. So
Yeah.
just make sure that you're taking care of yourself,
Yeah.
focus on who you love, focus
Hmm.
on protecting what you can, and
Yeah.
just try to focus on what's important.
Yeah. Yeah. That's yes. I think that wise words for the Mars energy. So kind of the last thing for the planets, because we talked, you brightly reminded me about the planetary alignment that's happening today, which is
Yes.
Friday, February 28th. And yeah, there's a lot in the sky right now.
Hmm. There
Yeah.
really is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because earlier, I'd gone out and on our low back porch, I was able to see, there's just a big line, from Mars up in the top of the sky, which is funny because of the conversation we're having right now. But there's that.
Yeah.
And then Jupiter's next, and then Venus was way on down by the horizon. So it's just a big line. Unfortunately, at least from where I was at in the world, Saturn and Mercury and all that wasn't visible. But it is, if I could see over the horizon, it would be. But unfortunately, I would just had the three. But it was really, really cool to see.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I'm gonna go outside after we're done talking and see what we can see. Because today, you guys in Seattle, there was like no clouds in the skies. Like we
Ooh,
should be able to see
pretty
something.
rare, actually.
Oh my God, for real. We've been suffering over here. Um, yeah, okay. And so kind of before we get to talking about like sort of upcoming things you have with the Given Ghost, any other projects
Hmm.
you're working on, like what does your I like to give people an idea of like what everybody's sort of daily practice in the realm of like spirit or self-development, like
Hmm.
what do you do either daily or weekly that kind of sets you in a good place for that?
So, in the last few years, a lot of what I've been focusing on is, contemplative practices. And, a lot of that, it looks different depending on the day,
Hmm.
but there are times where I'll, a lot of the time before I go to sleep, I'll try to make time to just try to empty out everything that everything that I've been through in a day, everything that I've been thinking about, all of my worries, everything, to try to allow myself to reach a point of stasis so that way I can just kind of let my mind see what it needs to essentially.
Yeah.
So trying to think about, you know, like what is it that I might not be seeing now that I need to, or what kind of directions may I need to take that I'm not currently taking. And so
Right.
just again, kind of like in the cloud of unknowing, kind of emptying yourself out so that way you can kind of have an impression of where or what is, pressing on you and nudging you in
Yeah.
certain directions. You can call it God, or you can call it, you know, the Force if you want. I'm a Star Wars fan, so I mean that's cool. But like,
Yeah.
like you can kind of allow yourself to be more receptive to those types of sensations and experiences. Um, Another thing, I try to do meditation as well,
Mhm.
pretty regularly. And even if it's, shadow to Denis, you can do it for 2 minutes while you're in line at the grocery store, like, you know, trying to take a moment where you can to be thoughtful about where you are in that moment and trying to think about, you know, unloading your shoulders a bit to clear your mind. So
Mhm.
that way you can have a more clear picture of the things that are ailing you or things that need your attention to have a little bit more of a lucid experience. And at times, I don't know what the name of this practice is, but I believe that there was somewhere that I read once in either Tibetan Buddhism or something like that, where you take time to stare at one fixed point for
Mm.
long periods of time, for not just for concentration but also for the eye to start doing what it does, and
Yes.
letting it develop images and things like that. And so I try to do that as well. And sometimes there will be some nights where I can't clear myself out and I can't allow myself to empty out, so I'll have to you know just try to fix my gaze on something and let images and impressions come in as they will.
Mhm.
And I had a really beautiful one the other day where it was
Oh,
just like gold lingering on the air. I'm like, oh, that's so nice,
oh.
like and so that's part of it too, is just like allowing yourself to have those moments of beauty and
Mm.
allowing yourself to have those visionary experiences where even if you don't know the answers to it, even if you don't have explanations for it, the experience is one of the biggest things that's important about it is just
Yeah.
making sure that you're there and present for it. Because if you can peek behind the veil, you should. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes you don't have all the answers, but if you do some of these little things, sometimes you can see a little bit more of the bigger picture.
Ooh, beautifully said. Yes. Yeah, I would definitely agree. Well, my practice is mainly contemplative and devotional
Hmm.
to the planets every day. Yeah, and it's exactly what we've been talking about this whole time is like
Yeah.
letting your heart or letting that kind of guide instead of like your brain doing all the
Yeah.
guiding 98% of the time. Like
Yeah.
yeah, give it the
Well,
space.
and and there's a certain, like, so I know that with mindful, like there's a big push towards mindfulness meditation and
Oh,
stuff.
right. Yeah.
And like, and that can be very useful. And
Hmm.
there are certain times where I feel as though it's not enough to, at least for my own purposes, I feel like
Yeah.
it's not enough to just be mindful of the body and now, right?
I
It's like
totally agree.
because it's like there's a lot more. Like Ram Dass is
Yeah.
great, but like, there's a
Yeah.
lot more too, like
Mm.
there's more than just the everything is nothing and I am experiencing the no thingness and whatever. It's like
Yeah.
that's great. That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's cool. To a certain degree, I agree, but also at the same time, it's like, how do I explain that I have a toothache? Or like,
Right.
like it's like there are things that are happening that are very clearly, even though beyond illusions or whatever, there's a no
Yeah.
thing. It's like, yeah, my tooth hurts, or I stubbed my toe and it sucked, like
Yeah.
whatever. Like those are factors of reality that exist also.
Hmm.
So even if it is an illusion, depending on certain perspectives, there is a reality to the things that we experience every day. And so being
Yes.
one foot in this world and one foot in the other, trying to have kind of a middle path balance view,
Hmm.
always trying to,
Yeah.
trying to see what glimpses you can and trying to understand them as best you can, and trying to be allow your heart to speak, because honestly, that's kind of the biggest hindrance, I feel, like you were saying, where the head kind of rules everything and it's kind of completely neglecting
Yeah.
to tend to the emotional needs that it has.
Hmm.
You know, it's part of the same body and same being, but yet it tries to take over and doesn't tend to the fact that like, oh yeah, like there's actually a lot of stuff that you really haven't worked out that you really need to, because otherwise you're just going to keep having bad experiences.
Yes.
You
Yes.
know?
Oh my gosh. Yes. So, everybody, figure out your own path. Try a contemplative, see if it works for you.
Yes, and and I promise, I'm not an expert. I don't claim to be, but I I will say that there's a huge benefit to opening that part of yourself to be a receiver, and to
Mm,
try to allow what subtle hands can guide you in certain
yes.
directions, you know.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah, because we're all trying to do it by ourselves.
Exactly. No, yeah, we're walking this path on our own
Yeah.
essentially. And,
Yeah.
even though we're living in a world full of people and full
Yeah.
of things and full of
Yeah.
experiences, ultimately all we have is ourselves to fall on.
Yeah.
And so eventually you have to kind of grapple with the stuff that's in you, and you have to kind
Yeah.
of grapple with the heart. And the best way to do that is to open it up. At least that's
Hmm.
what I've found. Maybe there's a different method, I don't know. But I've found that there's a lot of intimacy and meaning that can come from seemingly outer sources that are kind of pushing you in a direction and kind of allowing themselves to be known, and
Yeah.
through those subtle impressions that you get in contemplation.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Beautifully said. Yes. Ah. Well, okay. So is there, because you have the Given Ghost, you have all these like things that you do, like what are some upcoming events or projects that you're doing that you want to let us know about?
So the album just came out, and that was 3 years in the making, and it was so much. I poured everything that I could into that. And at the moment, I'm kind of taking a little bit of a break, but I'm still doing some tinkering and stuff. And I have some ideas for upcoming releases that they probably won't be full lengths. They're probably going to be more like EPs and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that I can make it as engaging and hopefully meaningful, or producing meaningful experiences as much as hopefully the album did for some people. And
Hmm.
you know, I'm going to try to work on that, continue to process those inner images and impressions to try to relay them in sound as best I can, which is hard. It's
Right.
really hard. Like taking an impression, like, I don't know, let's say, the name, the album, Fluid Numina, it's like, okay, liquid unknown or liquid essence. It's like, okay, how do I relay that without, you know, lyrics, or without anything that would resemble that? So it's like you have to rely on very subtle forms of resemblance, and
Hmm.
you have to really be kind of in tune and thoughtful with the sounds themselves that you're using to try to convey those things, and you have to be genuine. You can make a track that is relaxing, whatever, and call it whatever you want, but there's a certain, at least for my own sanity, for my own purposes, I feel like I have to attune myself and kind of sit with those sounds for a while and kind of let them percolate and become internalized, so that way I can feel out, like, is this a sound that can resemble this? And
Right.
so, it's a contemplative way of trying to almost befriend the sounds, and so that way they can inhabit a sound environment, and to relay a story and relay a picture of things that are difficult to put in words. And
Yeah.
so it takes time, and I hope that I can do that effectively. And hopefully in the future I'll let you know whenever that happens. uh,
Yes,
i'm
please.
hoping it'll be I'm definitely hoping to have something else before the end of the year. uh,
Wow.
Talking with a couple different artists and stuff about a potential album art, and um,
Hmm.
right now considering, vinyl pressings and stuff with the current thing and, hope, fingers crossed for some various other stuff. I'll keep you in the loop on that. But
Oh, please. Yes. Oh man, yeah, so many very cool things. And I love you talking about the process of doing it because it's like looping into what we've been talking about all day, sort of the contemplative nature, sort of the opening and the no words thing, which words ruled by the mind.
yes, exactly. Yeah, it's wind, And actually there's a
Yeah.
little bit of an irony to that, right? That the art of music is sound compressions that carry with them certain frequencies that we then hear in the ear. It's like, okay, it's
Mhm.
air that we're internalizing, but
Right.
it's air trying to get to the heart,
That's
it's air
right.
trying to get to the emotional and sensible aspects of ourselves that
Hmm.
are not often explored, things that can make you emote and make you feel a certain way and
Hmm.
you know produce powerful experiences from that. And so you're trying to take a different element all entirely and trying to force it into something else. And but that's the thing, and didn't really have time to touch on it today, but
Hmm.
there's more of a link between air and water than you think. There's a reason why it kind of works out that way.
Yeah. So many things. Yeah, definitely you could talk about like any aspect of what we did talked about today
Yes.
for like hours. It would be so fascinating. Oh gosh. Well, where can people find out more about the Given Ghost? You like where should people go? They'll be in the show notes, of course, but you can also tell us.
So, I have an Instagram for the Give and Ghost. I have a Facebook page. There's a Bandcamp page as well where I don't charge anything for the album. If you want to download it, go ahead. Like actually, it would mean a great deal to me even if you don't pay anything, as long as you can listen to it and have an appreciation for it and, have a personal experience with it, by all means, go for it. It's on Spotify too, as well as YouTube and everything else. So if you just look up the Given Ghost, you'll find me there. You'll find all those sounds there.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, yes, everybody check out The Given Ghost. Give it a listen because it's pretty great. Yeah, it's really wonderful work. And I know 3 years of your life into it. It's, very well
And,
done.
and I wanted to say thank you so much for let me on the show and talk
Yeah.
about all this stuff. It honestly, it's been an incredibly meaningful experience. And, I hope that, and to anyone who's listening and watching, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope if you take a listen to the music, I hope that you have an experience with it that is personal and that is moving to you and that you can relate to it in a way that's enriching to the soul or the mind or however you look at it.
Yeah.
I hope that you're able to have something to take with you from it.
Yes, that would be wonderful. And if you could, let MA know,
Yeah.
that would be great. Like send her
Yeah,
a
let
little
me
note
know.
about it.
Yeah, follow me on Instagram. Just send me a message.
Yeah.
And I will definitely read it and I'll respond. So,
Yes. Well, I mean, gosh, I always do this to my guests, and I'm going to do it to you too.
mm,
What because we just talked about so much wisdom that you've shared, but what words of wisdom would you like to leave us with today?
well, I think that what I would try to relay is to not let yourself be completely ruled by the head. Allow the heart to speak because oftentimes it needs to.
Mhm.
And if you're going through a hard time, if you're experiencing pain, just know that it's all part of the process and that we're here. And although it's just a part of life, it's a common experience. Everyone around you relates in some way or another. And even though that pain may feel as though it's coming from the depths of the soul and that it's, hard to get over and that you feel as though maybe you're falling into a bit of a hole, just know that one, it's not forever. Two, it's making you stronger, even though you don't realize it. And if you get in touch with the heart and allow it to speak, then you will hopefully come to a place of growth and come to a way of being able to get out.
Oh, beautifully said. Oh my goodness. Well, again, thank you, MA. I'm so happy that we got to chat finally
Yeah,
after
Marilee,
knowing
it
each
was so
other.
good. Thank you so much. I really appreciate
Yes,
it.
thank you. Your support means the world to us. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please take a moment to like, comment, and share it with others who might find this content valuable. And of course, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay tuned for more enlightening discussions. Your engagement helps us grow, and we appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for being a part of the Casual Temple community.